Well, hello there. My name is Lord Amael. I am an agroforester. I work with the Nebraska Forest Service, but also get to teach at the School of Natural Resources. I have 10 minutes to introduce agroforestry to you, so probably use time very well and get straight to it. So agroforestry is actually a combination of two terms that I believe we are all familiar with. That is agriculture and forestry. That we know our mainstream agriculture, especially those from this part of the world. We have our agricultural cropping, our soybean, our maize or corn, and we also have systems that combine um, maybe one or two crops on the same piece of land. But mostly what we are looking for in a system like that is our crop production, of course. But we do have, especially in the case where there are two or more crops, we have some income diversification. We're talking about green plants, so there's some level of carbon sequestration there as well, and some other benefits. Now let's look at our forestry side of things. We know our trees, our community of trees that form the forest, and there are several benefits of that as well. Um, we have some level of crop production, but reduced. I mean, compared to our mainstream crop production, we have some income diversification out there as well. For those who harvest some trees, we have carbon sequestration. There are some water quality protection aspect of it as well, and some wildlife habitat enhancement. So just the marriage of these two broad systems gives us agroforestry. Now, agroforestry, I like to look at it from several viewpoints, but I like the biblical angle of it. That means that it's been around for a very long time. Now, if you look in Genesis 2, verse 8 to 9, you see that the Lord God planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed, and he made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, that that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. Um, so I see it as, agroforestry system being incorporated there. You're talking about a garden with some crops, with some trees, and some benefits like, aesthetic benefits and some food purposes as well. So in terms of a definition, I like to look at this diagram a lot because I think it does real good justice to that term, agroforestry. Now you're looking at three broad components or main components of the system where we have livestock, we have crops, we have some trees in some kind of combination. And I'll talk about those combinations in a little bit. But one thing that I wanted to point out here is that agroforestry systems are intentional, they are intensive, they're interactive, and they're integrated. And it means a whole lot more. I mean, if you're talking about agroforestry, you're talking about people, definitely, obviously. You're talking about our planet, all the environmental aspects of it, and you're also talking about the economic side of things as well. So all these working together makes agroforestry a sustainable land use system, and it's something that we've sought to promote with what we are doing right now. So there are several benefits of agroforestry. I wouldn't bore you all going through all, but we have all the environmental aspects of things, the social aspects of things, and the economic aspect of it as well. Now, one thing that I need to mention quickly here is that agroforestry is not a conversion of agricultural lands to forest. It's never been that, at least in the case of tropical or excuse me, temperate agroforestry. And let's look at some like mainstream historical aspects of agroforestry. It's always been used in agricultural systems, as I said. But I think a formal documentation of it started right in the agricultural revolution era and down into the Middle Ages, where we had like home gardens transitioning to slash and burn agriculture. People wanted their food to be grown close to them. All the hunting and gathering had to cease, and people became more settled. So with those settlements came that kind of a system where people wanted to grow their own crops, have their own livestock, plant some agricultural crops and trees on the same piece of land. In the United States, however, I mean, the story is quite not as old as the tropical system, but we had many tribal groups using it, using some form of agroforestry. They were doing some kind of crop production, or actually like maybe harvesting some crops from forest canopies. And in the tropics, I'm talking about, Hawaii and the Pacific Islands, for instance. It's used very extensively, or it's being used very extensively. But in the United States, in the mainstream United States, temperate United States, it kind of gained roots right around the Dust Bowl era, where we saw around like 850 million tons of topsoil being blown up by the wind in the early 1930s. So this kind of heightened the interest in finding some kind of very natural ways to prevent such a disaster from happening again. And one of the things that one of the plans that was brought forth was, the use of shelter belts or windbreaks, and these are just linear plantings of trees. I'll go through that shortly. But they ended up planting about 8,600 miles of windbreaks, especially here in the Midwest, where the Dust Bowl had the biggest impact. Now, in terms of a timeline, right from that period of the Dust Bowl era, we went through some significant landmarks in terms of agroforestry promotion here in the U.S. I won't go through all of them. The slides are available, so you can look at it one more time. But what we are seeing here is that, based on where we are at, whether we are in the tropics or the temperate region, we are exposed to very different situations for trees and crops. So systems here, agroforestry practices used in the tropics are very different from what is used here in the United States. Um, this is like a pictorial kind of compositional diagram of how those systems look like in both the tropical agroforestry landscape and the temperate landscape. Now, in temperate United States, we have five main practices that are used, and all these come from that diagram that I showed you. We have silvopasture, we have windbreaks, we have riparian buffers, we have forest farming, and alley cropping. And alley cropping is just rows of trees or shrubs that are planted in lines on the same piece of land with cultivated crops in the alleys or space between the tree rows. And we have forest farming or multi-story cropping, which is just agricultural products that are grown under the canopy of trees. Then we have riparian forest buffers that are basically areas of vegetation money around water bodies to intercept nutrient, pesticide, or sediment runoff, stabilize stream banks, or maintain some cool water temperatures and provide habitat for wildlife corridors. We have silvopasture, which is the intentional combination of trees or livestock and forage crops on the same piece of land. We have windbreaks that are just rows of trees or shrubs located near agricultural lands just to slow winds. Now, what practice is used and where in the United States? We have alley cropping, and this is a very cool tool from the National Agroforestry Center that you should all look at. But basically, it's telling us or giving us a picture where practices or where particular agroforestry practices are used. You see here that alley cropping is not used here in Nebraska. Multi-story cropping or forest farming is not. We have some riparian forest buffers. We don't have any silvopasture establishment, and this diagram needs to be updated. Actually, we do have, of course, windbreaks here in Nebraska. We do have some windbreak renovation. And if you talk about tropical agroforestry practices, these are based or categorized very differently from what we are seeing here in the temperate world. We do have on a functional basis, on a socioeconomic basis, on an ecological basis, and more of the popular structural basis, which is based on like the spatial and temporal arrangement of the trees and crops. And under that, we have agri-silvopasture, we have silvopastoral, we have agro-silvopastoral, and we can go through this another time. But basically, these are the different types of agroforestry systems in the tropics, and there's no time, so I can't go through all of them. So I'll end it here, but I'm willing to take any questions that will come up, and I believe your instructor will forward them to me, and I'm more than happy to maybe expand this class or this talk anytime. So have fun, and yeah, be safe. Thanks.